After one heck of an NFL season, we went through 31 teams. It leads us to this. One final mock draft, the Super Bowl champion, everything we built up into this. The Philadelphia Eagles fly. What is cool and what's going on? Hope you guys are having a really good day. We are going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and what do they need to do to get even better. Howie Roseman has built an unbelievable trench-built firehouse. Now we got to continue to add because there are some decisions that they're going to have to really make. So we'll go through the roster, the strengths and the weaknesses, and what they need to do in free agency with a little strategy and a 7-round mock draft. So let's start with the roster and the offensive line. It is the best offensive line, not one of the best offensive line. It is the best offensive line in the NFL. I said it. You got two great tackles. I think these guys, Lane Johnson, it may be the best tackle of all time. Like, he is right there with the top tackles of all time. You go down the list, you name it. He is one of the most consistent tackles in all of football, one-on-one. There's nobody better in the league than Lane Johnson with consistency purposes. He may not be the most dominant. He may not blow you away like Penei Sewell or Trent Williams, but you talk about consistency, Lane Johnson is unbelievable. And then on the other end, Jordan Mailata, he's unbelievable as well. Now, he brings a little bit more pop, a little bit more bang to the table, especially as a run blocker. Not saying Lane's a smuck or nothing like that, but Mailata, definitely, he's got that engine, man, and that firepower. He did miss 4 games this season, but when he was on the field, he was unbelievable, excellent. These two guys are under contract. Now, Lane Johnson is getting a little bit older. We need to start thinking about the future. He's already said, look, he wants to still play. He still feels like he's got plenty of the tank, and barring some significant injuries or et cetera, I think he certainly has all the talent. Like, he's still super athletic. He's still strong. I don't see any reason why there's a massive dip or slowdown. But looking at the depth too here, you got Jack Driscoll, you got Fred Johnson, Darian Kennard. That's kind of the group right now. Driscoll, Johnson are both free agents. And that leads me to, they need to start investing. This is something you need to invest in with Lane Johnson, 35 years old. That in the future there, getting somebody to develop for a couple years behind him. And Jeff Stoutland University, always important. If nothing else, they need a swing tackle. Fred Johnson, not bad, and definitely played well when called upon. I still think they can look at a long-term viable option in that regard. Jack Driscoll can play on the inside, can play on the outside. And Darian Kennard, also a guy, maybe he can develop into a swing tackle for them. They seem to like him, so we'll see how that all develops along. Overall, this is a day 2 type of priority for me. On to the interior of the offensive line now, and Landon Dickerson is a monster, a mean bugger up there on that front. All these guys are really. Cam Jurgens gives you a little bit of Travis Kelce in there with his movement skills and run blocking prowess. Mekhi Becton, unbelievable story, big ticket. As a Jets fan, I'm so happy for Mekhi Becton, really rooting for him. And you can see the emotion on this guy's face. It meant so much to him. What else is there to say? You know what I'm saying? Like, I could tear up just thinking about Mekhi Becton and the things he went through. So I'm just so happy for Mekhi Becton. I really am. I hope they re-sign him. I don't think that he's going to want, or he'll be willing to take something of a team-friendly deal to stay here in Philadelphia. I just feel like he's going to maybe take a little bit below market value because he could get a lot more somewhere else. But what he's been able to do here, staying relatively healthy too, is so important for him and for his rest of his career. So I'm rooting for him. And if not, though, Tyler Steen is there. Now, Landon Dickerson, we got to talk about the injuries because I will say this, and that's why I think bringing back Mekhi Becton is so important for this offensive line. I mean, they could draft somebody early if they want to, but Tyler Steen can fill into one of these guard spots. He's definitely serviceable. I think he's capable, solid pass protector. And then Landon Dickerson, with that injury, having the knee surgery, his timetable could be early on where it's like maybe he has to sit out part of the first half of the season or the first quarter. I wouldn't say half, maybe just a couple of games. However, the extent of that injury hasn't really come out in full details yet, so we'll keep an eye out on that. As of right now, if he does miss a couple of games, Steen can certainly fill in. Cam Jurgens looks to be good to go with his back procedure by training camp timeframe. So in general, I feel good about Jurgens. My big priority here is re-signing Mekhi Becton. Tyler Steen is your swingman. You got Trevor Keegan, who's another guy that I think can end up developing into a second, third option behind these guys. My overall goal of this is bring back Mekhi Becton, and they should be in a pretty good spot here. Now you go on to the tight end room. You got Dallas Goedert. I actually think Dallas Goedert's a little underrated in the NFL. Most people talk about Travis Kelce, or they talk about even Brock Bowers, of course. Brock Bowers is not underrated. Anyway, you go on to other guys like George Kittle, etc., Mark Andrews. Dallas Goedert, he is one of the best all-around tight ends in football. I think he is a great blocker. I mean, he really is a great blocker. And he's also a really good receiver, too. So Dallas Goedert, it just comes down to sometimes he has a little bit of injury concerns, and there are games where he does have to sit out, and he missed a couple of games this season as well. So that is the biggest knock that I have on Dallas Goedert. However, overall, like Goedert is a top tier weapon. I would even look at trying to give him an extension. They probably could find a little bit of deal. And you look at when A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were out, like Dallas Goedert stepped up in a major way. And as this team's third option, it's crazy to have. Grant Calcaterra also was good when Dallas Goedert was out too. So Calcaterra is a nice receiver option. Now, he's not much of a blocker. So there's that. And that's why I still think they could draft somebody to develop in here just in case, because Calcaterra is going to be a free agent. Dallas Goedert will be a free agent after this season. So investing in the tight end room makes a lot of sense, like in the 3rd to 5th round range. I don't think it's an early need, but it is something that I'll be investing in. But Dallas Goedert, oh my gosh, he's just so good, man. And he had one of the best plays I think I saw all season this year, where he just Carrington Valentine's going to have nightmares of this dude. Anyway, EJ Jenkins also got to keep an eye out on. He's a really athletic guy. I've heard a lot of good reports on him, and he definitely has all the athletic tools. A little bit more blocking upside, I think, than Calcaterra does. So we'll keep an eye out on him. Let's go on to the wide receiving room, which this wide receiving room is excellent. You got 2 superstars, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. So it's not a huge need. They traded for John Doxson. Hasn't quite worked out just yet, but he finished the season off strong. Looked good, too, in the Super Bowl. So we'll see, hopefully, some elevation there with John Dotson. He doesn't have to be unbelievable. He just needs to be a solid number 3 wide receiver, especially if you have injuries or whatever. And Dallas Goedert, of course, is kind of your number 3 anyway. But it's definitely some elevation there. Johnny Wilson's a nice role player. He's a really good blocker. So I think if nothing else, they can try to develop him, continue, and see how that goes along. My view on this, though, A.J. Brown, your number 1 wide receiver, but Devontae Smith, I actually, even though the numbers were down on Devontae Smith, I thought this was his best season. They were just a run-heavy offense. Devontae Smith made so many big plays this season, and you can make the argument even that Devontae Smith, I mean, A.J. Brown is so good, but Devontae Smith, it's just, he really had a great season. So I think it's, something to point out there that it was neck and neck this year, and who's better? A.J. Brown is so dominant, though. He really is. Both of those guys, unbelievable targets. You got 2 number 1 wide receivers in the NFL right there. Overall, would I do anything here? You could invest a late round pick in this. I don't see this as an early need at all. This is just something that's like a late 6th round, 5th to 6th, 7th round / UDFA type pickup. On to the running back position. Saquon Barkley. Oh my goodness. My favorite player in the NFL. Let's go. I was so happy for Saquon Barkley this season. Just like Mekhi Becton, Saquon Barkley dealt with so many trials, tribulations through his career, gets into a good landing spot with the Philadelphia Eagles, good offensive line, and you see what happens when you have a stud like Saquon Barkley, a true top-tier talented guy. He just does it all, man. And, of course, you got to give credit where credit's to the offensive line. You got to go hand in hand with both of these guys. But at the same time, Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the NFL, in my opinion. He's right there with Derrick Henry. Him and Derrick Henry, I think, were the best running backs in the NFL this season. Saquon Barkley, so happy for him. I would have liked to have seen him get the rushing title, but I understand, and it's a good thing they did it. And for the grand scheme of things, keeping him rested, keeping him healthy into the playoffs was the most important thing for what they needed. Kenneth Gainwell is a free agent. Nick Sirianni loves this guy. I think there's a good chance that Gainwell comes back. He's a nice number 2 running back to have, that when Saquon Barkley needed a break, you bring in Kenneth Gainwell, and he did it. He did a solid job. He's solid in pass protection. He's a good, reliable number 2 guy. So as long as they can bring him back on the cheap, no worries there. But Will Shipley, I thought Will Shipley certainly, coming out of Clemson, he has all the talent. He has good acceleration, good burst. He's maybe not the most agile guy, but he definitely has some power to his game, fighting through blocks and whatnot, and definitely has home run speed as well. So Shipley should be able to work into the number 2 if they end up losing Kenneth Gainwell, or at least long-term, Shipley should be able to work into that. If they lose Kenneth Gainwell, then they'll have to draft somebody probably in the 5th, 6th round UDFA. That's really about it, though. I think they're in a really good spot here. Quarterback-wise, Jalen Hurts. He's under contract. He's your franchise quarterback. This is not a need. The only thing that I would say is maybe you trade Kenny Pickett after this season, because I think Tanner McKee is You could give him the keys to be the, yeah, I know, pun intended, sorry, pretty bad one, but I'm full of bad jokes, just getting started with the day. But Tanner McKee is a guy that I think should end up being the number 2, and I would trade Kenny Pickett, save a little bit of money since they are a little tight with the financials. Go ahead and trade him to a team that I imagine they wouldn't give up. They wouldn't have to. He's still a tradable asset. Like, they can get something back in return for Kenny Pickett, somebody who's willing to pay $2 million for his contract as a good backup fringe starter for you, and it makes sense. And then Tanner McKee could end up being their backup. You pick up a veteran on the cheap or a UDFA in free agency to compete for that super third spot. And that's really what you could do to get a little cheaper in that regard at the quarterback room. Jalen Hurts, obviously the quarterback, and he's your franchise quarterback. You can still make the argument he's not the best pocket passer, but what he brings to the table with his heart, his winning mentality, and overall playmaking ability, it's unmatched. Go on to the defense now and start off with the edge rushers. They've been really good here, obviously. Josh Sweat playing so good in the playoffs there and in the Super Bowl, making big-time plays. Brandon Graham, vintage Brandon Graham. Nolan Smith did get a little banged up. He's going to be a guy, another one that you got to keep an eye out timetable-wise. Everything looks to be like he'll be fine for next season. However, once again, just something to keep an eye out in the back of the mind. Hopefully, Bryce Huff gets fully healthy, gets a full system with Vic Fangio, and kind of turn things around, okay? Because he really was a big disappointment for them. I still like Bryce Huff. Like I talk about as a Jets fan, he's super talented, and you're getting a good football player. It just seemed like some of the injuries caught up to him this season, going through a little bit of a scheme difference. And I expect him to be a lot better going into next year. And I'm sure Eagles fans are hoping for the same. And they're going to need him to be a lot better, especially since he's under contract. He can't really get out of the deal, at least not right now. And he's going to be asked to step into more of a big-time role next season. Now, Jalix Hunt, third-round selection, whoo, he's a guy. We knew he had the traits. He had all the tools. He's a really athletic guy as well. You give him another full season, and he's already showing off some pass rushing ability there. So Hunt's a guy that definitely can hunt after the quarterback here as well. So between Huff, Hunt, what names too? Huff and Hunt. I mean, Hunt and Huff. That's two great pass rushing names. So I got to give him credit there. And then Nolan Smith. Those are your 3 guaranteed guys going into next season. But you're going to lose Josh Sweat. You're going to lose Brandon Graham. They're going to have to add to this room, whether it's a veteran in free agency, whether it's a draft pick. I think it's maybe a little bit of both, possibly. So we'll be looking at to add to this room, but it's not maybe like as top of a need as possibly some other areas because they at least have Hunt, Huff, and also Nolan. But I do think there's a really good chance that Josh Sweat ends up getting a big contract in free agency, and then Brandon Graham ends up retiring here and ending off a Hall of Fame level career. On to the interior of the defensive line. You got Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter as your starters here on this defensive front. Moro Ojomo, a guy that I was a huge fan of coming out of Texas. So glad he got more of an opportunity this season. He's gotta plant the flag. Sorry, I'm bragging a little bit out here, but I've got plenty of bad picks too. But Moro Ojomo was definitely one of those I really was a huge fan of. So I'm so happy that Ojomo has been able to really I think he's taken that next step here. Really good pass rusher and if nothing else, a good rotational player for this team. They're going to have to add to this room because Milton Williams, I just don't see that they're going to be able to extend him. And everything that it's pointing out from, his shirt that he was wearing after the Super Bowl and, things reports, he's going to get the bag. And well earned, man. I wish him the best. And he's certainly going to, he's deserved a contract and he's going to get that. But you look at this interior, there's not huge worries because you at least got 2 superstars, and Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis had his best season too. I think Jordan Davis was really good this year and just helping this defensive line, keeping the linebackers clean too as well. So between Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Moro Ojomo, it doesn't mean that they have to go at this in the first round, but I still think it's an early need, especially in this interior defense line class. That's another reason why I'm not super worried about drafting or extending Milton Williams, because they can find some more help here. They need more depth because they were lucky that they didn't get a lot of injuries. So no matter what, they're going to need to add more depth to this interior defense line just in case they have more injuries next season. Now, in terms of draft need, what I'm going to look for, I am going to look for somebody who can be like a hybrid player, somebody that can play a little 3-tech, can play a little nose, be a rotational guy, somebody who can give him a little bit of both of elements. Onto the linebacker position here, you got Zach Bond, arguably one of the best players in football this season. I'm not even joking, like he was that good. He was just unbelievable in his coverage ability. He made so many big-time plays. You talk about the forced fumbles this season, I feel he had. The plays at the line of scrimmage he had. He can play on the line of scrimmage. He can play off the ball. He's strong at the point of attack. I mean, what can Zach Bond not do? My overall view on this with Zach Bond is you got to extend him. You got to find a way to be able to pay this guy. He is so pivotal in Vic Fangio's defense. And then Nakobe Dean, also very good. Nakobe Dean had a bit of a breakout season, in my opinion. He was so good. I mean, he's not as good in coverage as Zach Bond, but he's really good at making plays around the line of scrimmage. He flies to the football, has a good read and reaction skills. Oren Burks was a really, really good, solid backup as well. Jeremiah Trotter maybe can develop into a good backup for them, or at least somebody that if Nakobe Dean is going to be out for a little bit in the beginning of the next season, then maybe Jeremiah Trotter can step up, because I do think Oren Burks is going to get a contract elsewhere, especially with the way he played down the stretch at the end of the season for them. So overall, I will be looking at drafting some depth into this room / bringing a free agent in here. They're going to need to add some depth no matter what, but Zach Bond is a priority re-sign. Absolutely have to. No less. On to the cornerback room. What a turn. How the turntables have turned, right? Because this cornerback room went from one of the worst to one of the best. Credit to Vic Fangio. Okay, a lot of credit deserves there, but Cooper DeJean, just unbelievable rookie season. And what he'd meant for this team in the slot, not just as a blitzer and a run defender, but in coverage. He made so many big plays. You talk about the Patrick Mahomes interception, but not just that throughout the season. He is an instant upgrade for them in the secondary. You got Quinnia Mitchell, also an instant upgrade for them in this secondary. Not a whole ton of bad things to say about these two rookies. They were both fantastic in coverage. Darius Slay. I do give Darius Slay the best rating in this room, and it's mainly also because Cooper DeJean and Quinnia Mitchell a lot of times got put on the strong side in bracket coverage, but you talk about the guy like who went one-on-one, who was on an island a lot of times, it was Darius Slay. Big play Slay, he is still unbelievable. I know there's a lot of rumors that he's going to end up retiring or end up getting cut and maybe go back to Detroit. We'll see what happens. I know Howie Roseman's going to have to figure some things out there financially. If it were me, I'm finding a way to keep Darius Slay for his last season, whatever, until he retires, because he is just so good still. Yes, he's a little bit older, and that is a big consideration, the decline, cornerback, whatever, but nothing to me telling me that he's going to have a massive drop-off next season, barring some major injury or something like that. You do have some depth with Kelly Ringo, Eli Ricks. Maybe between Ringo and Ricks gives you some more depth, but I think you try to bring back Isaiah Rodgers as your fourth cornerback. He's another guy that screams like he's already said he wants to stay in Philadelphia for the rest of his career, so why not try to bring him back? And I don't think he'd be super expensive either. He's a really good backup, and I actually think he could start. So if you do lose Darius Slay, if you want to let him go, or if he retires, then hey, Isaiah Rodgers certainly seems to be a great fit with Vic Fangio. Avonte Maddox was really good. He stayed healthy for the most part this season as well. Great in the Super Bowl as well. So he's another guy that you could try to bring back on the cheap. It's just going to be, what does the contract speak? In general, this is not a huge draft need. It's just kind of figuring out free agency-wise, who you bring back, who you sign, things like that. Safety's more of the draft need, in my opinion. Here's my reasoning for this. Reed Blankenship, really good football player. He's just got a nose for the football. He's an instinctual guy. Maybe not the craziest athlete, but very, very sound football player. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had a rough start to the season, but he really got better as the season went along. I was talking about drafting a replacement at the beginning of the year in mock drafts, and as the season went on, I'm like, no, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he's playing unbelievable again. So got to give credit there with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Definitely elevated his game as the season went along. But you got to look at the future. Reed Blankenship going into last year of his contract. I fully expect an extension there, but that is something they could consider at least, because he might get a little bit more of a contract. Could be up in the $7 to $10 million range. So that is something they're going to have to really look at. And also Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is under contract for next season, but he could be a cap casualty next year too. So in terms of the depth there, you got Tristan McCollum, Sidney Brown. At this point, I'm not super high on it, as one of those guys stepping into the long. Maybe Sidney Brown continues to develop or whatever, but with that being said, I do think they need to still draft somebody. It's not an early need, but it is a draft and develop situation. But it's time to go into free agency now, and this is where things start to get a little technical with the finances. Howie Roseman, what is he going to be calculating up in here? I'm going to go ahead and start off with the team cuts / trades / re-signs. All over the place here with this one. James Bradbury, I'm going to let him go. There is a little bit of dead cap there, but it's a post-June 1st cut. It does not count to the cap right now. Okay, so this money will come later on. So I'm not including this money as of right now. It is something that they'll get later on, and it'll help them if they want to bring in a vet or an edge rusher or whatever, whoever they need in camp, if they have injuries, etc. That money will help them out later down the line. Kenny Pickett, I'm going to trade for a 2026 draft capital, late round pick, just recoup some assets, and what you had to trade for him makes a lot of sense. You save $2.6+ million there, and he can go be a backup somewhere or a fringe starter elsewhere with Tanner McKee stepping up into that role. And then Cam Jurgens, I'm going to give him an extension, 4 years, $52 million, $20 million signing bonus, a rough estimate. Okay, I think he's going to get somewhere in that 11, $10 to $12 million mark, and that's kind of where I put him there. So it lowers our cap hit too, gets that base salary. It's really the only Kenny Pickett and Cam Jurgens are the only guys that are not making $1 million in base salary on the Philadelphia Eagles cap situation. Go look, trust me, it's funny. But anyway, Howie Roseman's funny in general, but that is what it is. Let's go on to the team re-signs. We need to talk about Mekhi Becton. I'm not re-signing him. Sorry, let me rewind there. What I meant to say is we are re-signing Mekhi Becton to a 3-year deal. But dude, just Mekhi Becton. That has to be is going to be one of the more iconic videos, images right there. It was just that was great. It was great. You can't help but tear up a little bit when you watch out Mekhi Becton. Let's go, big ticket! And we're going to bring him back. Absolutely, 3 years, $27 million. As I talk about, I do think he's going to be willing to take a little bit less money to stay here in Philadelphia. Now, if he wants big money, then I wish him the best, and he's going to go somewhere else, and that's fine. But for right now, I do think from the rumors and things like that, I think he's going to be willing to take a little bit less money. So bring him back on a 3-year deal. You're paying all your guys on the offensive line. So I also can understand the reasoning to say, well, let's not pay Mekhi Becton because then you're paying all 5 of your guys. We just gave Cam Jurgens an extension. Can we afford all 5 of your offensive linemen when you have Tyler Steen, who could end up starting for them and getting a little cheaper in there? That is a really good argument. But once again, I root for Mekhi Becton. I'm paying him. It is what it is. So there's a little bit of bias there. I'm going to be honest with that. Kenneth Gainwell also is another guy where coaching-wise, Nick Sirianni has raved about this guy. He's a locker room dude. Let's bring him back. Really good depth. He shouldn't be super expensive. I don't think he's going to get a ton of injuries on the open market either. And then you got your long snapper, Lick Lovato. Let's go and bring him back. And then defensively wise, we had to make a couple of tough decisions too. Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, I just think they're going to get a much bigger contract elsewhere. And just, I had to find the money for Zach Bond. I prioritized that. 3 years, $54 million. It is $18 million average, so it's a big deal, okay? But Howie Roseman getting that structure right. He'll put some void years or whatever. $5 million cap hit year 1, so keep that cap hit low and retain Zach Bond. And then Isaiah Rodgers will be our last re-sign here for the unrestricted free agents. 2 years, $8 million. Very fair contract for a guy that could be a really good backup and then maybe take over for Darius Slay if he does retire or whatever happens there. And I will say, some of these other guys I would have liked to bring back, like Oren Burks or Fred Johnson even. Maybe Jack Driscoll comes back on a cheap deal back at least in training camp, things like that. Avonte Maddox. But once again, the cap-wise, I got to be real careful with that. So that's really why we let some of those guys go. You talk about the restricted free agents, there's only 2. Now, Brent Covey is a restricted guy. Now, he's somebody that I'm not giving the tender to, just a little bit too much. That'll be like $3+ million. I am going to see what happens with him. He could get a little bit more money. He is coming off an injury, so that is the reason why I think they're going to be able to re-sign him. Now, next year, probably won't be able to re-sign him afterwards, but this year, I think they can bring him back. He's a good punt returner, so I like the value of bringing him back on a cheap 1-year deal. Ben Van Sumeren, he's kind of like a fullback, hybrid linebacker, special teamer. Keep him around. He's an exclusive restricted, so he should be back very cheap. Go on to the free agent signings now. And you got Armand Watts. We're going to start off. It's nothing. There's not going to be any splash signings here or anything like that, but bring some depth in here. Armand Watts, they certainly need some depth on the interior of the defensive line, and Watts can do that. He can be an early down player, etc. Just give you a little more depth behind Jordan Davis there. And then Mykal Walker, same thing here. We lost Oren Burks, so I figure he can come in there with some veteran leadership. And just in case they have injuries or whatever, Nico Bedin isn't ready, then Walker can step in, etc. If Trotter isn't ready, all those things being said. And then last but not least, our effective draft cap is going to be $2.5 million because once you take into account what you bring in and also some players that are going to get released, that is from over the cap and their effective draft costs. So I point that out. And lastly, I do want to mention this is in the negatives. So I'm not super worried about that. And it's within the margin of error. Things will change. They're going to release some players. They're a little over the roster limit anyway. So I'm not super worried about being just slightly over. They'll be able to figure that out as long as it's not like crazy, you know what I mean? So let's go ahead and highlight the draft needs one more time before we get into the draft. Starting with the offense. My biggest need on the offense side of the ball is probably going to be a tackle of the future in this regard. especially since we gave Cam Jurgens an extension, I'm not worried about drafting a center too much. Now, I would draft somebody or I would get somebody UDFA wise, or in the fifth, sixth round at the center position as a backup, just in case. Dickerson can slide over there in a pinch, but I do think they need to add at least some more competition. Overall, though, like getting a tackle is like a second or a third round type of need, in my opinion. Getting someone on day 2 makes a lot of sense to be able to develop for them and give Jeff Stoutland a little bit of a more, time to get somebody in there long term, just in case Lane Johnson does retire in a couple of seasons or whatnot. And then next need, I would say, is a tight end still, with the fact that Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra both being free agents next season. We'll definitely look to add at least a little bit more depth. Maybe EJ Jenkins can step into there, but I do want to add a little more help there. And then you look at the wide receiver wise, that could be a late round throw / UDFA pickup. Same thing with running back. Quarterbacks, also possibly a veteran in free agency at the end, before the season, to come in and compete with Tanner McKee for the backup role or third spot. Then on the defense side of the ball, this is where really my bigger needs lie, I would say. We need to get more pass rush. We need to get more rotation on this defense line. Interior defense line specifically, I'm going to prioritize over the edge rushing position. Mainly because, look, you got Bryce Huff. I do expect him to be better for this team next season. You got Nolan Smith, who's really established himself and could grow and take that next step into a star player next season. Jalix Hunt, I have a lot of confidence watching some, plays from him this season, making so many big plays as a rookie too, that he's going to get better and be a really good rotational player, if nothing else, next season. So that to me means maybe more of a second, third round need. I'm not going to pass it up. If a James Pierce Jr. or Jalen Walker, whoever falls, I'm taking one of those guys. But based on the board, I think it makes a lot of sense. They could find somebody on day 2 with the depth in this class. But interior defense line would probably take the priority if I had to pick at the moment. And then you look at some depth at linebacker, still something we could address late in the draft, UDFA wise. Safety, something I will look at for the future, just in case Reed Blankenship is not re-signed. And then also with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, could be a cap casualty next season, possibly, of course, if they need to move a little bit of cap. He's the one guy I would say that has a little financial flexibility next season if they wanted to do so. Cornerback, I think, is in a pretty good spot. I really do. I don't think they need to do a whole ton. Are you ready, Eagles? It's draft time. Tyleik Williams is going to be my first selection here. The interior defense lineman from The Ohio State University. He's got good size. He's got that wide frame. Now, he's not the longest guy or anything like that, but he holds the point of attack. He's super strong. He's got a really nice bull rush. His first step is underrated, in my opinion. I can't wait to see his 10-yard split time because I think he's going to impress big time. He's a quick guy. He's got quick feet, and he's got quick hands as well to get off blockers. So he's going to come in there. I think he could be a meaningful 400 snap player in his rookie season for this team. And it just helps out, right? Because now you have your rotation between Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis mainly being your 2 full-time starters. But Moro Ojomo, Tyleik Williams, and we brought in Armon Watts. That gives you a nice room, a nice solid rotation of guys on that interior defense line, just in case you have injuries. And then we go on to round number 2. Cameron Williams, offensive tackle. Doesn't he look like an eagle? You talk about their offensive line, maybe the biggest ever in history in terms of just weight-wise. They are a monster group, and they can move some guys. Cameron Williams can move guys as well. He's got raw power. He's got length. He's got size. All the tools where Jeff Stoutland's saying to himself, oh, okay, yeah, come on. We're going to go into our couple year. We'll go get that bachelor's degree at Jeff Stoutland University, give him a couple of seasons. And hey, even in like 2 years, he would be 23, 24 years old. So it's like, hey, I'm not worried about that. Even if Lane Johnson plays for 2-3 more seasons, Cameron Williams will still be super young, and he can end up taking over and hopefully be a seamless transition right there. With that talent, yeah, I'm taking a chance on. He's a raw player, so I don't think he's a guy that starts right away. He could if you had to, if you have injuries, etc. And they need a swing tackle. On to our next pick in the 3rd round. Olufemi Oladejo, the UCLA pass rusher, kind of came out of nowhere. When he took it to the Senior Bowl, this was a guy I had not studied at all before the Senior Bowl process. He really took that up and elevated his game so much in his draft stock. And he's one of those guys you had to go back and watch the film and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's got traits. Now, he isn't maybe the most athletic guy out there, but he is an athlete. Like he's got good speed, and he's a guy that has really solid arm length as well, just under 34 inches. He looks like a pro. I mean, he's built so well. He's got a former linebacker pedigree as a Mike linebacker. So he's like a Vic Fangio type of special, somebody that can be a developmental edge rusher for them as he continues to develop his pass rush plan. Just as he's just developing as a pass rusher, a true edge rusher, but he has versatility to drop back into coverage with those instincts, especially in like basic spot drops and things like that. So he's going to fit right into Vic Fangio. Just seems like a perfect scheme fit with those traits, with the upside that he has in that third round to give you that fourth edge rusher for them. Then we go on to round number 4. This is a guy that I keep comparing to Zach Ertz. He reminds me so much of Zach Ertz. So hence, that's why I'm taking him here. Thomas Fidone from Nebraska. You look at Zach Ertz and some of the things that he's so good at. He's got good solid size, 6'4.5", 241 pounds. I thought he played a little bit bigger at that in Nebraska. Those were his measurements at the Senior Bowl. I think he was just trying to drop a little bit of weight there. I think he's easily can get up to 250. He's got the frame to do it. Really athletic guy, good mover. Now, he's not maybe the most agile guy, just like Zach Ertz. He's not like crazy agility. He doesn't have that sort, but he's got great linear explosion and burst. He's a tough-nosed blocker as well, and just somebody that plucks the ball consistently with his hands. Really like his game as a receiver and as a blocker and what he can be for this team as a developmental tight end. On to our first 5th round pick, and we're going Dan Jackson. We had to go with a bulldog. I know it is what it is. I got to cop out here, but Dan Jackson, another guy that did not really know at all going into the Senior Bowl, watched him and came away impressed. And he's a guy that kind of reminds me a little bit of Reed Blankenship. You talk about some of the similar traits. He's not the most athletic guy, but he's a tough-nosed guy. He comes downhill in a hurry, and he consistently makes plays in the box. And he's also got good instincts and coverage to make plays. He's a good reading and diagnosing plays and stuff like that in the back end. So if you're trying to draft some sort of understudy for Reed Blankenship just in case you can't extend him after this season, well, Dane Jackson is a guy that I think fits a lot of those traits. Let's go into our next one, Q Robinson, who is an edge rusher hybrid player there at Alabama. Really, this was his first full year that he got a chance to play at Alabama, mainly was a special teams player. And I think at the NFL level, that's really what he's going to thrive in, especially early on. And as time goes on, he can develop and be like a backup for a Zach Bond, somebody that can play a little on the line of scrimmage, can drop back into coverage. He's a really good athlete. He's got great size as well and great length. So he could just be a developmental guy as an off-ball linebacker. He's going to need some time, and I really like him as a core special teamer for this team. Final pick of the draft, Elijah Badger. What a great name. And they got some good names on this roster. Why not add another one? The Badger. From Florida and formerly of Arizona State, transferred over from the Sun Devils to the Florida Gators and was very solid. And the quarterback play was a little up and down for the Gators this season, but Badger, very good after the catch. I think he's an underrated athlete. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete. Like, he moves really, really well. He's got solid size, 6'1", 187, and I think he can continue to add a little bit of weight there. And his route running is good too. I think he's a really underrated wide receiver and somebody that if he can continue to get more consistency with his hands and just overall with his route nuance and things like that, because some of the times, I don't think he's an elite route runner or anything like that, but I think he's a good route runner with good yak ability and with solid speed. He's just got a lot of traits that I look for in a good receiver. So, and he's also got pretty good high point skills as well. So certainly a guy at the end of the draft here for this team is just a 5th, 6th receiver you can develop just in case if Jahan Dotson, he's probably not going to extend him after this year. So a Badgers, also he could certainly return punts for them long term because I think he can return. He's got good vision in the open field and kick return experience. So that's going to do it here for our draft. Want to talk about one thing real quick because you do have to consider a new offense coordinator. They're going to have some new coaching in general, but Kevin Patullo is going to be the new OC, the former passing game coordinator. I think it's going to be a little easier than when they lost their 2 coordinators last time. This time, I think that Patullo, with that experience, that know-how in the building, and with Nick Sirianni, I'm not expecting too much of a drop-off here. There will be some growing pains, I'm sure of. Overall, not super worried about that. Vic Fangio retains your defensive coordinator. Nick Sirianni's a really good head coach. Howie Roseman, one of the best GMs, if not the best GM in football. So coaching-wise, staff-wise, they're in a really good position. Now, roster-wise, I talk about this. Mock drafts are just mock drafts. I think it's so important to understand that players are really in these mock drafts. It's important to find scheme fits and things like that, but there are so many different players they could go after. The board's going to look totally different. This is a simulated board for me. I just look at players and what ranges what I think they're going to go at, and I try to make projections and things like that. But it's going to be totally different when the actual draft happens because these teams have medicals, they have often on the field things. There's just so many things to consider. So I want to throw that out there. You may not like these players, you may like these players, but there's just so many different draft ideas. I try to put a concept together. You got to build a free agency plan, and then you got to use that free agency plan. You go into that with the combine and all those tools that you had beforehand too, which is coming up right now. And you go into the draft and say to yourself, okay, we're going BPA. We got a couple of positions we're trying to hit. We're trying to prioritize these now for the future, etc., and try to hit those positions. And some of those positions that I feel like they need to hit this offseason are offensive line. Of course, continue to invest in the offensive line. So what Howie Roseman does, get a tackle to develop for the future. We got Cameron Williams in this scenario. There's a lot of guys they could go at one in the third round, fourth round, I would say at latest. But I do think they need to invest in one, ideally on day 2. One other thing, I think they could pick up a UDFA at the center position. Since they did lose Dylan McMahon off the practice squad last season, that's something they could also pick him up or pick somebody else up in UDFA-wise in this offseason to help out, give a little more depth there. Besides that, though, tackle would be my priority there. Tight end, I certainly wanted to add somebody here. Without an extension to Dallas Goedert or Grant Calcaterra at the moment, going to have to invest in that. I could definitely see them getting Dallas Goedert on an extension. I still would do it. I still think they need to draft somebody. Even if they give him a 2-year extension, I would still try to draft somebody at tight end. I think it's more of a early day 3 type of need no matter what. Now, this is a good tight end class. So if they want to draft somebody on day 2, I'm not against that. There are some good players that could be on the board there. So that's another option, another route that they could go as well. But overall, I think between rounds 2 through round 5, that's where I'm looking at adding a developmental tight end for them. And then wide receiver, I decided to throw a pick at that. It's not necessary that they do that, but I do think they could add somebody there. Running back, possibly another throw, but I think we're in a good position. On the defense side of the ball, my main priority was certainly beefing up the defensive line, right? We need to continue to add there. It's been a Howie Roseman special. And you look at when they win the Super Bowl, their trenches have been dominant, and that's the key recipe for them. So we're going to continue to bolster up the trenches. We add in Tyleik Williams in the first round. I did prioritize interior defense line a little bit more over edge. As you can see, I got Olufemi Oladejo in the third round. Hey, I wouldn't hate it if they got an edge rusher in the first round, got an interior defense lineman on the second or third round. Lots of options there. I just prioritized Tyleik Williams or an interior player because I felt like they need more rotation here, especially if you have more injuries creep up. But now between Williams and Ojimo, those are your kind of rotation behind Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. We brought in Armin Watson free agency. So you kind of got your group of 5. Maybe Gabe Hall steps up, biz that number 5 or 6 guy too. And then edge rusher wise, Olufemi Oladejo. You might want to bring in a veteran. Absolutely. And that hey, Brandon Graham hasn't retired yet. And if he wants to come back, then that leaves the door open too there. So I didn't want to close the door on that, okay? Because he may want to come back. You never know. But I'm just saying, I would definitely try to bring in a veteran free agency. They'll get some cap relief too post June 1st. So you can always there's always somebody available that you can bring in on a cheap veteran minimum contract. In general, though, I want to make sure that we got the youth, right? You got Jalex Hunt, you got Nolan Smith, and you got Bryce Huff. And hopefully Huff gets better as he gets healthy. Between those 3 guys, that's a good solid rotation right there. Olufemi Oladejo can work in, especially as the season goes along. You bring in maybe one more vet before in training camp, etc. And that should be a good group of edge rushers. It's not perfect. There'll be some growing pains. I think they'll be okay long haul, though. And then we got Q Robinson, who's another guy who could be a situational pass rusher for them, too, but I think he ends up transitioning to off-the-ball linebacker as a developmental player there, or a hybrid player. And then last but not least, Dan Jackson will add some more secondary, just in case Reed Blankenship is not re-signed after the season. Add some more safety depth in general, because C.J. Gardner-Johnson, also another guy that contract-wise next season, you never know what's going to happen there. So that's going to do it here for the Philadelphia Eagles and the roster breakdown, free agency strategy, and mock draft. Super Bowl champion Eagles. Let me know what you think. What a great season. Congratulations, Eagles fans. It was a fun one to watch, and I hope you guys have a really good day. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions. Do you agree or do you disagree? Definitely let me know, especially if you disagree. What would you do differently? Have a cool day, though.